All right, Josh Neighbors.
Yep.
There you go. Sorry, we had to take you on the fly there. Josh Neighbors joins us. We're live in Orlando. Josh is out and about. You normally have Josh on Zoom, but Josh, a wild weekend last weekend in college football. Kind of sets up an interesting one. Big 12-wise, there are some critical things that have to happen, and we'll start at the bottom. Houston and Texas Tech, like this game is the season saver game for either team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of down at this point in time. Like, I'm pretty down on Houston. I think it's pretty safe to say that Houston is not a team to do. That win against UTSA was great, but after that, they've really just been downhill ever since. So I think that I think for them it kind of feels like it's trending the wrong way, and I think Texas Tech's got a better chance to do so, in my opinion. But I'm not confident. Either of these teams looking too good.
Josh, what do you think is the biggest problem that Tech has?
I think it's their pace of play. I think to me that's the biggest issue is that, like, I really do believe that when you play like that, you're going to be in some really close games. And so, and there's going to be a lot of swings in those games. There's going to be a lot of times where it's up and down, and they have to manage a lot better the swings in the other direction. The Wyoming game, it swung back towards Wyoming, and they did a terrible job of managing that lead. And in the Oregon game, they made the more mistakes in the end of the game. Last week, they got themselves behind and couldn't make it up. And I think that pace, you're going to go, your possessions are only going to last sometimes, a minute or a minute and a half. And you can't stack those possessions to put your defense on the field goal. So they have to manage that.
Josh, Baylor and UCF, that's the game we're here covering. UCF not great on defense. Baylor not great at anything yet. How do you see this one shaking out?
Yeah, it's crazy to see Baylor as a 11.5, 12-point underdog. That is a really strange thing for me to see, against the UCF team. But I think UCF, the one thing they've done pretty well is, like, they've got so many skill players that the fact that the quarterback, they lost John Rice Plumlee. And so I think that I don't feel comfortable with the number, but UCF to me has more weapons. It's not a good defense, but we're not talking about a Baylor offense that's good at taking advantage of situations like this so far throughout the season. Even with Sawyer Robertson's backup in, it's just not been an offense that inspires any kind of confidence at all.
What do you think about UCF moving forward as long as they have to with Timmy McClain at quarterback?
Yeah, so I think for them this year, with Timmy McClain at quarterback, like I think it's obviously not going to be as good as John Rice Plumlee, but I think it's still got a shot to be good because once again, they've got so many of these good skill players, and they're a well-coached team. Like I think K-State's the second best team in the league, and last week that was a game in the fourth quarter. So Gus Malzahn has managed this thing to a point, in my opinion, where they've got a chance to do this, to be competitive. In any game they play, and the defense has to get better. But offensively, it seems like they can bang people. They can score. So I would be encouraged on the UCF fans because of that.
All right, Kansas and Texas is the best game of the week, as far as matchup ranked to ranked. This is the first time in this rivalry that each of these teams has been good at the same, let's say, rivalry, or in their series. It's not a rivalry, although it might be for Texas now that Kansas has jumped up and bitten them a couple times. But what do you think this one does? Because both these teams are really good. Kansas can score on anybody. They may not be able to stop Texas in the key moments, but I don't think this is going to be an easy one in Austin for the Horns.
Yeah, so I think the one thing Kansas does really well is they manage pace. Like talk about Texas Tech not doing it, because Kansas completes a lot of their passes and they're a really good running team. They have the ability to shorten games and keep the clock moving. So if they can do that, they'll actually put themselves, like, the big key for them is you want to limit possessions, and then once you limit possessions, you need to get red zone stops. So this Texas offense is a lot better than the KU defense. But if you're able to get stops in the red zone, then you're going to be in really good shape. And I think that there's a chance they could get some of those red zone stops. Now, Texas red zone offense is bad. The red zone defense for KU is bad. So that'll be a fun matchup there. But, yeah, I really do think that, that Kansas has a chance because of how good their quarterback is. And if you go back and watch the Alabama tape, there were some opportunities there for KU or for Alabama to take advantage. Like there were some opportunities for sure, but Milroe didn't make the throws. Daniels is a bit better at making those throws, and I think it gives them more of a chance. I either think like it might be a route on Texas, or KU kind of wins it outright type situation.
Jack is picking West Virginia to beat TCU. Could he be right?
No, their offense can't score with TCU. I think as good as the West Virginia defense has been, I mean, if it's Nico Marchiol back there, I don't have enough confidence in Nico Marchiol as a quarterback, to lead them. And I mean, he was terrible last year. He had a really difficult time moving up and down the field at all. The defense won them that game, and this offense is a lot better than the defense is the other way.
Whose defense is better, though, TCU's or Tech's?
TCU's. I think TCU's defense is better than Tech.
Okay, well then, yeah, that lines up.
Josh Neighbors, the Neighborhood Watch on Crystal Ball College Football. Josh, around the country, a couple of interesting ones. LSU and Ole Miss. You were talking about Jalen Milroe, when he played against Texas. Last week, he kind of found a little bit of his stride against Ole Miss late in that game. And Ole Miss missed an opportunity to really put Alabama away, out of the race. And, people, kick some dirt on them. They didn't do that. Now they got LSU. Now, granted, they're coming into the Grove, but still, I think LSU is the best team in a down SEC West. I don't know if Ole Miss can really, if they couldn't get Jalen Milroe under control in the second half, what are they going to do with Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, and Daniels seems to be, we saw him last week against Arkansas. He's definitely on the same page as the receivers right now. The problem for them was the defense. And once that offense gets cooking, it's really hard to stop. And I don't know if, Ole Miss has the horses to check them on the outside. And was not impressed with Ole Miss's offense last week. It was not an offense that felt like they were taking advantage of a lot of situations where they could have caught Alabama. And for as much as Lane Kiffin talks, you think they'd catch in a bit more. But I know people are a bit weary. This line has not really moved at all. A lot of the wagers are coming in on LSU, but the line kind of stayed there. So I think there's some money backing the Rebels this week. I think them being at home obviously is big, but things for Lane Kiffin kind of go in two directions. Either it's consistently up or, kind of going down. So I think that I'll take LSU. Survived last week. I think going on the road and how well their offense playing, I'm not going to pick against that team. Also, they have a better coach. I think Brian Kelly is a fantastic coach. And Lane Kiffin's good, but his talent's worse, and I'll take Brian Kelly with better talent too.
Notre Dame at Duke is an interesting one now for the first time ever in the history of Notre Dame ever playing Duke, because you would not have said that even with Notre Dame being bad and Duke being bad. There would have been a boring game, but here they are. Notre Dame is reeling from that last-second loss to Ohio State. Duke is one of the physically toughest teams that you will play. So does Notre Dame get back on track this week?
Yeah, I think that the interesting matchup here is Notre Dame's wide receivers against the secondary for Duke, because Duke took a bunch of transfers. They're pretty good in the back end. And Mike Elko is a fantastic coach. You can tell Mike Elko is one of those guys, as a coordinator, like even at Wake Forest. You can tell this guy has had the chops to be a head coach. And going to a place like Duke, I'm not sure he's long for a place like that. But I think that's kind of the matchup to watch. Notre Dame's had a ton of success against ACC teams as of late. But this is a fun coaching matchup because right now Notre Dame's coaching is what's being criticized multiple times last week, 10 men on the field. And so they have to recover from that. I think there will be enough, there'll be some Notre Dame fans who, this is such a big opportunity for Duke. And I know they beat Clemson, but Clemson beat them in that game. They didn't punt in the second half of the game, and they didn't score. So that kind of tells you what was happening with Clemson's offense. And I think as bad as Notre Dame's offense looked last at times, they still have the ability to take the top off. So they'll take some risks. Good secondary from Duke, but I think Notre Dame's got the horses to go there and win that game.
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame will have a bit of a better offensive performance this week. Both those teams, Ohio State and Notre Dame, it felt like they were both playing without oxygen for a long time. And then they would breathe for a second and score, and then it just the whole time it was so tense. Yeah,
that game, that last drive, if you go back and watch it, how long it actually took, it was a 15-play drive for Ohio State, They ended up taking like a minute and 55 seconds, I think. And, because it was third and down, fourth down the entire time. But I was really impressed because Kyle McCord wasn't that good, but he was really good on that drive. I think Ryan Day's enthusiasm after the game kind of mirrored that. I was like, wow, I was so impressed with having to have it on every single play. And that talent will do for you in a lot of situations like that. And that's kind of always been a problem. That's why Brian Kelly's no longer at Notre Dame. Like, that was just all right, we're going to keep throwing it to Becca Ibuka. We're going to throw it, to tight ends. We're going to throw it to Marvin Harrison Jr. And they got every conversion they needed to. And just, a terrible gaffe there at the end because Kip Trainum runs right where the Notre Dame wasn't because the guy was off the field. So I think it's a good bounce back spot. I think it's kind of clear your head, big spot, but like also a team you can handle from a talent perspective. So I like the Irish chances.
All right, tonight we got Utah and Oregon State. Oregon State came roaring back, but could not get it done against Wazoo, if I'm trying to win the Pac-12 title, Wazoo is one of the last teams I want to play because I think they might actually wind up playing for the championship. Like the way that Cam Ward's been, I know there's a lot of season left to go in Washington and USC and Oregon and all those still exist. But that was a really great game last week. Oregon State has more offense than Utah right now. We don't know when Keim Rising's ever going to play again for Utah. Is this the night that Utah's defense finally gives up like one more point than they should and lose, or can they keep grinding people into a powder?
Yeah, you kind of wonder, like, when does the dam break? But Oregon State's not the kind of team that makes the dam break, I guess, in that sense. I do think they just lack so much punch on offense. I mean, you watched last week, they scored 7 points on offense. I mean, they have the pick six, against UCLA. And DJ's up against it, man. I mean, in big games, he has not been very good. And this is an excellent challenge. And so I think if you're a Utah fan, you do feel encouraged. He's a great defense going up against a quarterback who's not been good in big games. But Oregon State's coming back home. I think they understand the magnitude of games like this, especially in a season like this. They're about to have a conference next year. Like, you're trying to make a point. You're trying to be as relevant of a program as possible, and every win helps in that respect. So I think it's a massive night for Jonathan Smith and that program, and I think they'll be prepared and be ready. 4 points, I feel like this can be like a field goal type game, but you see what Utah is missing across the board. And it feels like if Oregon State can force them into a couple of mistakes in their end of the field tonight, then that might just be it. Because Utah's offense, I don't know if Cam Rising's come back. Frank Keefe's not playing, and they're missing guys up front as well, too. So I'm pretty confident that, like, this Utah team is one of the best coach teams in the entire country. But the clock might strike midnight because they've been playing with fire for a couple games now.
All right. Did your opinion about Colorado change at all last week?
No, I actually think I kind of like their chances this week to be competitive. I think Deion Sanders knew what was coming last week. He was pretty quiet. But, that was a freight train coming at them with Oregon, and Oregon was motivated. Oregon's a lot better up front than Colorado is, and that was hammer and nail. I've never really liked Alice Grant's defenses, so I feel like this week is less of a hammer and nail type situation just because, you never know how many points USC's defense will give up because it's not a – I don't think they're, like, extremely talented, and Alex Grinch doesn't do a whole lot for me, especially when it comes to the fundamentals for his defenses. So I think this game has a chance to be a lot closer. I think Oregon looks a lot tougher up front on both sides than USC does at this point. So my opinion didn't really change because I didn't think they were that good of a team. I just think that people were talking about it because that TCU game carries so much weight, and beating Nebraska was a big game. The Colorado State game was a lot of fun, but, I think we kind of know what this team is in the end. I've always likened them to last year's Kansas team. They started off hot, but once that depth is tested, that's the one thing they have to build. They took so many transfers, and these guys are not really strong players in their places before. Like, they weren't playing a lot. So as the depth gets tested, like we saw with KU last year, I think their ability to keep playing at a high level on both sides, or, maintain a high level, or a winning level at least, on either side of the ball is going to diminish, especially with how bad their defense is. Right? Like, Kansas would score 35 points in games last year against Baylor and OU. They just give up 50. So I think that's kind of where this thing's headed for Colorado, although they will pick off a few teams in the Pac-12 along the way.
Josh, you doing a high school game tonight?
Yes, I'm in the vehicle right now. We are heading to Searcy for Searcy against El Dorado.
All right, break that one down for us.
You know what? My prep was going to be done in the car on the way there once I got the number of you all. So TBD on that one.
Okay. All right, Josh Neighbors, the Neighborhood Watch on the Crystal Ball College Football. Thanks for hopping on, Josh. It was last minute. I appreciate it every time we have you. Enjoy the game tonight. Enjoy the weekend.
Thanks, Paul. You too.
All right, Josh Neighbors,